I laughed. It was the kind of laugh that surprises even yourself, quiet, almost involuntary, the kind that escapes when something is so absurd that your brain doesn't know what else to do with it. My son-in-law was sitting at my kitchen table, eating the breakfast I had cooked, talking about the NFL playoff odds, and sleeping with my business partner of 22 years. I had found out 4 days earlier. I hadn't said a word to either of them. Let me back up. My name is Frank. I'm 63 years old. I live in Tucson, Arizona, in a house I built with my own hands, not metaphorically. I mean, I actually swung the hammer on the framing crew back in 1991 when my wallet was thinner than my patience. I spent 30 years building a commercial landscaping company from a used truck and a borrowed seed spreader into something real, something that employed 41 people, maintained contracts with 3 hospital systems and a university, and had my name, Callaway Outdoor Services, on the side of 18 vehicles. I was proud of that. I was also, as my wife Sandra liked to remind me during our better years, a man who paid more attention to soil pH than to the people in his own living room. She wasn't wrong. Sandra and I had been married 31 years when she retired from nursing, and I was still putting in 60-hour weeks. Our daughter Kristen had married a man named Derek 4 years ago, sharp, handsome, the kind of guy who knew how to shake a hand and look you in the eye. He had come to work at my company 3 years back, managing our client relations division. I liked him. I trusted him. I had started, quietly, to think of him as the person who might one day take over what I'd built. My business partner, Ray, had been beside me since the beginning. We met in our 30s, shook hands on a 50-50 split over bad coffee at a Denny's in 1998, and never looked back. Ray handled the finances and vendor relationships. I handled operations. We complemented each other the way that old partnerships do, not because we were alike, but because our edges fit together without gaps. Or so I thought. It started with a number that didn't match. I'm not a details man in the romantic sense, but I am meticulous about my business. Every quarter I reviewed the financials personally, even after we had brought in a full accounting team. It was a habit Sandra teased me about. You're going to be 90 years old, Frank, reviewing invoices in a nursing home. Maybe she was right. But that habit is the reason I noticed, on a Tuesday afternoon in February, that a vendor payment of $68,000 had been routed to an account I didn't recognize. I didn't say anything right away. I pulled the last 8 quarters of records. I cross-referenced. I sat with it for 2 days, because I am a man who does not speak until he is certain. By Thursday, I had found 11 transactions over 14 months. A total of $412,000, moved in amounts just under the threshold that would have triggered an automatic audit flag. Someone who knew our system very well had done this. I had 2 partners in this company, Ray and Derek. I hired a forensic accountant on Friday. I told no one. The forensic accountant's name was Patricia. She was 50-something, wore reading glasses on a chain, and had the calm, unhurried manner of someone who had seen every variety of human dishonesty and was no longer surprised by any of it. She spent 6 days going through everything I gave her, and on the 7th day she called me on my cell phone while I was sitting in my truck in a grocery store parking lot. "Mr. Callaway," she said, "I need to walk you through what I found, and I want you to be sitting down when I do." I told her I was already sitting. "The transactions were initiated from 2 access points," she said. "One set of logins belongs to Raymond Harker. The second set belongs to Derek Wills." I sat in that parking lot for 40 minutes after we hung up. I watched people push carts in and out of automatic doors. A woman helped a small child pick out a quarter from her purse for one of those toy dispensers near the exit. A man in a Diamondbacks cap loaded groceries into a minivan. Everybody just going about their day. I drove home. I made dinner. I did not say one word. The investigation took 3 more weeks. During that time, I went to work. I sat in meetings with Ray, who showed me spreadsheets and made jokes and talked about his granddaughter's soccer tournament. I had Derek over for Sunday dinner twice, watched him help Kristen clear the table, watched him slap me on the shoulder and call me Frank, with that easy familiarity that I had once taken as warmth. I smiled and passed the rolls. Patricia had connected the outgoing funds to an LLC registered in Nevada 19 months ago. The LLC had 2 members. She wouldn't say their names over the phone. For the second call, she sent them in an encrypted document. Raymond Allen Harker, Derek James Wills. They had been building a competing company. Our vendor relationships, our client data, our operational systems. They had been using company funds to capitalize it. Derek, in his role managing client relations, had already begun making soft introductions, nothing that would set off alarms. just planting seeds with our biggest accounts. Thinking ahead, he probably called it to himself. Getting ready for the day they would walk out the door and take half our business with them. Or maybe they hadn't planned to walk out at all. Maybe they had planned to take the whole thing. I don't know. I never asked. What I did know was this. I had a choice in front of me. I could confront them, feel righteous for about 48 hours, and then spend the next 3 years in litigation while they buried documents and my company bled out. Or I could be patient. I have always been a patient man. I called my attorney, a woman named Louise, who had handled my contracts for 15 years and had the disposition of a chess grandmaster. I called my bank. I called 3 of my anchor clients personally. I told them I was reaching out as part of a service review initiative and would like to meet for lunch in the next month. I did not tell them why. They agreed, because people always agree to lunch with a man who has reliably shown up for 22 years. I also called my daughter. That conversation was the hardest thing I have done in my adult life. Kristen is 34 years old. She is, without question, the finest thing I have ever had a hand in producing. She got her mother's stubbornness, my work ethic, and some third quality that belongs entirely to herself, a kind of steadiness, an ability to hold herself upright in difficult weather. She had married Derek, believing she knew him. She had made a life with him. A house, 2 dogs, a plan that included children they hadn't had yet. She answered on the second ring, the way she always does when I call. Dad, what's up? I told her I needed to see her in person. I told her it was important. She asked if I was sick, and something in her voice, that particular catch, that quick intake of breath that parents recognize immediately, made me close my eyes for a moment. I'm not sick, I said. I'm fine. But I need to sit across from you and tell you something, and I'm not going to do it over the phone. She came to the house the next morning. I made coffee. I sat her down at the kitchen table and I told her everything. I walked her through the documents. I showed her the numbers. I told her about the LLC, about the vendor relationships, about the clients Derek had been quietly courting. I kept my voice level because I knew if I didn't, she would focus on me instead of the information, and she needed to process the information clearly. She was quiet for a long time when I finished. Then she said, "How long have you known?" 3 weeks, I said. And you sat across from him at this table? Yes. She looked at the documents for another minute. Then she said very quietly, I knew something was wrong. I didn't know what. I thought it was me. Those 6 words did more damage to me than $412,000 ever could. I reached across the table and put my hand over hers, and I didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. Sometimes the only honest thing you can offer another person is your presence. She asked me what I was going to do. I told her I had a plan, and I needed 3 more weeks. She nodded. She is her father's daughter. Louise had been busy. What we had put together, over those careful weeks, was airtight. The forensic accounting report, transaction records with timestamps and login credentials, emails between Ray and Derek, retrieved from the company server by our IT contractor, that discussed the competing LLC in terms that would make a jury straighten up in their seats. A voicemail Ray had left Derek, which Derek had inexplicably saved, in which Ray said, and I will never forget this, Frank's never going to see this coming. He trusts us too much. That's always been his weakness. His weakness. 22 years of partnership. The man had stood beside me through a drought that nearly killed the company in 2008. I had lent him money when his mother needed home care, and his savings were gone. I had been at his daughter's wedding. I had held his first grandchild while he cried in a hospital hallway. His weakness. I let that sit in my chest for exactly 1 evening. I poured myself a glass of bourbon, sat on my back porch, looked out at the desert where the saguaros were turning orange in the last light, and I gave myself those hours to feel it completely. Then I poured the rest of the bourbon down the sink, went to bed, and woke up at 5:30 the next morning the way I always do. There was work to do. On a Monday morning in April, I called a company-wide meeting, 41 employees. I told them we were announcing some structural changes to leadership. I asked Ray and Derek to join me and Louise in the conference room 30 minutes before the full meeting. They came in separately, which I found interesting. Ray was wearing his usual pressed shirt. Derek had his coffee. Louise was already seated. The documents were already on the table. I didn't give a speech. I have never been a man who enjoys speeches. I sat down, opened the folder, and said, I want to walk you through what we've found. I watched their faces. Ray went pale in a very specific way, the color draining from the forehead down, like a window shade being slowly lowered. Derek's jaw tightened. He looked at the documents, then at me, and for one moment I saw something in his face that I hadn't expected. Not defiance. Not calculation. Shame. That surprised me. I hadn't anticipated that he still had the capacity for it. Ray started to speak. Louise put her hand up, not unkindly, and said, "I'd strongly advise you not to say anything until you've consulted with your own counsel." He closed his mouth. I looked at Derek. I said, "I want you to know that however this ends legally, whatever Kristen decides about her marriage is her decision and hers alone. I will support her completely either way. That is not a threat. It's a fact." He nodded once. He was looking at the table. We had filed a civil suit that morning. Their legal exposure was significant wire fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, misappropriation of trade secrets. Louise estimated the damages at well over $1 million, once you factored in the client attrition they had facilitated and the operational costs of the diverted funds. The competing LLC had 3 clients. We had learned that the week before. 3 months of work, and they had 3 clients. Whatever they had imagined this would look like, it had not looked like that. Ray resigned that day. Derek was terminated. Security walked them out, which is a protocol Louise had insisted on, and which I had agreed to, though something in me found it slightly theatrical. I am a practical man. I just wanted them gone. The legal process that followed was long and exhausting in the way that legal processes always are. I won't detail every motion and counterclaim, because frankly I spent enough time living it. What I will tell you is that we reached a settlement 14 months later that recovered $318,000 and included a non-compete agreement that effectively prevented Ray from operating in commercial landscaping in Arizona for 5 years. The LLC they had built dissolved 6 months after they left. I never found out what became of it, and I didn't try to find out. What I did find out from Kristen, who had stayed in the house with Derek for 6 weeks after she learned the truth, trying to decide what she wanted, was that Derek had told her, during one of their last conversations, that he had always believed the company would eventually come to him, and that he had been tired of waiting. Tired of waiting. I had been planning to have exactly that conversation with him. I had an attorney draft a preliminary partnership agreement. I had been waiting for the right moment. I thought about that for a while. I thought about all the things we don't say to each other, all the assumptions that calcify in silence until they become something neither person can see around anymore. I thought about whether things might have been different if I had been a man who talked more. Then I stopped, because that kind of thinking is a rabbit hole with no bottom, and I have a company to run. Kristen filed for divorce 8 weeks after Derek was terminated. She came to me the evening she made the decision. She didn't ask for my opinion, and I didn't offer it. She said, "I've thought about this very carefully, and I know what I'm doing." That was all she needed to say. She knows what she's doing. She always has. The divorce was settled in 4 months. Clean, by the standards of these things. They had no children. The house was sold. She moved into an apartment in the Rincon Valley, 10 minutes from me, with her 2 dogs and an indeterminate number of houseplants, and a schedule that had her working as a project manager for an engineering firm downtown. She came over for dinner on Sundays. We hadn't always been close, not as close as I'd wanted, for a lot of years. I was the kind of father who showed up to the important events, but was absent for a lot of the ordinary days, and ordinary days are where you actually build a relationship with someone. She knew it. I knew it. We had never quite figured out how to close that distance. After everything, somehow, we did. I don't entirely understand why difficulty has that effect on some relationships. I suppose when you've seen each other navigate something real, not politely, not with distance, but up close and honestly, you learn that you can trust each other with the weight. We started talking on the phone most evenings. She would ask about the company. I would ask about her projects. She is better at the ordinary days than I ever was, and I have been trying, in my 63rd year, to learn from her. She brought her dogs over most Sundays. 2 large, ungainly, deeply enthusiastic Labrador mixes named Walter and June. They ran laps around my backyard and knocked things over and seemed genuinely unconcerned with the dignity of the proceedings. I loved those dogs immediately. Ray called me once, about a year after the settlement. I don't know what he expected. I let it go to voicemail. He said something about hoping I was doing well, about how he had thought about everything, about how he was sorry. I listened to the message twice. Then I deleted it. I don't carry bitterness, it's a weight I've never found useful. But forgiveness and trust are 2 different things, and I wasn't interested in confusing them. I wished him no harm. I also wished him out of my life. Both of those things can be true. I want to tell you something about what I learned. Not the legal things, not the business strategy. I learned about those too. And if you run a company and you're not reviewing your financials personally, at least quarterly, I would gently suggest you start. But that's not what I mean. What I mean is this. I spent most of my adult life believing that the work was the point, that what I was building, the company, the contracts, the reputation, was the thing that mattered, that the people around it were part of the structure but not the foundation. I was wrong about that. And it took losing something significant to understand how wrong. The foundation was Kristen. It was my crew. The guys who had been with me for 15, 20 years, who showed up the morning after news of the lawsuit broke, with their heads down and their work boots on. Not because they were legally required to, but because they had decided years ago that this was their company too. It was Patricia, the forensic accountant, who sent me a handwritten note after the settlement was reached that said simply, "Well done." It was Louise, who had billed me accurately and fought for me hard, and always told me the truth, even when the truth wasn't what I wanted to hear. Those things are the point. The money is just a way of keeping score. On a Saturday morning in October, 14 months after everything began unraveling, and 9 months after the settlement closed, I drove out to a property in the Catalina foothills, a new commercial development contract. A big one, the kind that would keep 40 crews busy for 2 years. I got there before anyone else. The sun was just coming up over the rincons, turning the whole valley that particular gold that only happens in the desert in autumn. The saguaros were standing in it like they'd been there forever and intended to stay. I sat on the tailgate of my truck and drank bad coffee from a thermos and looked at the land. I have been looking at land for 30 years, reading it the way other men read faces its elevation, its drainage patterns, where the water wants to go, what it will hold, and what it will reject. Land does not lie to you. It tells you exactly what it is, if you take the time to look. My phone buzzed. A text from Kristen. "Walter ate one of my shoes again. 3rd pair this month. I'm considering legal action." I smiled at my phone. "Sue him in small claims court," I wrote back. "He's judgment-proof, but it might embarrass him." 3 dots. Then, "Dinner Sunday? I'll bring Walter in June. Walter will eat your shoes for a change." "Deal," I wrote. I put the phone in my chest pocket, finished the coffee, and sat there another few minutes while the light changed, and the desert went from gold to ordinary, and the day began in full. I was 63 years old. I had been deceived by men I had trusted completely. I had spent 14 months in a legal process I hadn't wanted. I had watched my daughter's marriage break apart and then watched her put herself back together with the quiet competence of someone who knows her own strength. I had lost a partner and found my footing. I realized, sitting on that tailgate with bad coffee and a new contract and Sunday dinner to look forward to, exactly where I wanted to be. It had taken losing what I thought I had to understand what I actually owned. And what I owned was worth a great deal more than $412,000. Betrayal hurts most when it comes from people you built something with, but Frank's story reminds us that what breaks apart in dishonesty can quietly reveal something stronger underneath. He didn't just recover his money. He recovered Sunday dinners, phone calls, 2 muddy dogs named Walter and June, and a daughter who finally had room to move closer. The foundation was always there. Sometimes it takes a crack to finally see it. A small note to our viewers. This story was imagined and written by AI, crafted to entertain you and leave something genuinely useful behind, because a good story, real or fictional, can still tell the truth about what matters.